Hey everyone, my name's Leslie and I'm so excited to be joining the Mormon Trauma Mama team to raise awareness of church trauma within our community. Church trauma is painful and it's debilitating. It is awful, but it is so common and pervasive within Mormonism. The thing is, we don't have the language to describe what it is and why we feel the way that we do. My goal is to take the fear and the difficulty out and bring in authenticity. So we can't talk about church trauma without referring to the illustration that Dana Hartline made. Down here, she has put the roots of church trauma, the causes. Up here are the effects. The effects are what we see. We see the trees and the branches of the tree. So we see things like people leaving the church. We see family dysfunction, mental illness, fear, confusion, cognitive dissonance. And we also see shame and suicide. Yeah, suicide. Church trauma is that debilitating and devastating that people are resorting to ending their lives in order to be free of the pain. Now today I'm going to cover the causes of church trauma. The list I'm going to talk about is not comprehensive, so please, if your cause is not covered, it does not invalidate your pain or your trauma in any way. The first cause I'm going to talk about is organizational behavior. So we are a community of faith. We follow the teachings of Christ. We learn about Christ every Sunday that we go to church. We learn about the principles that he brought to the gospel. Things like love, acceptance, belonging, responsibility, authenticity, vulnerability, humanism, and validation, forgiveness, repentance, all of these things. So often though, we see that our church does not behave in ways that embody these values of Christ. That can be very hurtful. We see our church acting more like a corporation rather than a community of faith. More recently, we see this in regards to abuse survivors within the church. We see victim shaming, victim doubting, victim discrediting. We see them protecting predators and enabling abusers. This is so painful to abuse survivors and to anyone who can really see what is going on. We need to hold our church accountable, and the church also must be able to hold itself accountable. It must turn itself around and be free of these actions that do not follow Christ. The second root I'm going to cover is patriarchal structure. Now, patriarchy is everywhere. It's in society, it's in government and business and religion, and it's in our religion. We operate on what is called a benevolent patriarchy. That means that men have the leadership positions, they make most of the decisions, they have the authority. But they are presumed to do so with humility and sacrifice. They are always supposed to keep in mind the women's best interest. They place women on a pedestal. All of these things are problematic. Even though intentions might be good, outcomes are bad. Bad. If women are not represented in the decision-making process, their thoughts and their values and their needs cannot be fully honored. I want to say that again. Women are not honored, even in a benevolent patriarchy. They are not. Patriarchy also has effects that affect men. Things like toxic masculinity, rape culture, modesty rhetoric, and power imbalances are normalized within patriarchal systems. We are teaching these things to our children, and this is not healthy. The third root I'm going to cover is unrighteous dominion. Within the church, we have a special name for abuse of power and authority. That name is called unrighteous dominion. It's canonized in our scriptures. It's that important. It's found in D&C 121, verse 39. Essentially, unrighteous dominion is spiritual abuse. When a leader practices unrighteous dominion on a church member, it is frequently used to silence, manipulate, coerce, or shame that member into thinking, doing, or behaving in a way that the leader wants them to. So often we see this in regards to domestic abuse as well. So it's in family systems, and it's also within congregations where a leader has unchecked power. Spiritual abuse is damaging and it's devastating to a person's core being. The next root I want to cover is unsafe policies. Our friend Sam Young recently led a movement to protect LDS children. He wanted to get 10 words added to the church's formal policy on interviewing children and youth. Those 10 words were no one-on-one interviews, no sexually explicit questions ever. It sounds reasonable enough. It has been proven to be next to impossible to get those 10 words enveloped within our formal policies within the church. When we do not adopt policies that are safe, we teach our children that it is okay to go into a room with a man and close the door, and he can ask you any question that he wants. This does not facilitate healthy boundaries or safe practices for our children or youth. The next one is cultural behavior. So we've all sat in gospel doctrine before when someone says something really stupid and inappropriate. So often, do we correct them? No, nobody corrects them because it's uncomfortable. We're kind of told that we need to be a peacekeeper. We don't want to call someone out because we experience a situation of groupthink in those situations sometimes. We also have what is called identity culture within Mormonism. Things that we do and ways of behaving and statuses that we achieve within Mormonism can add to credibility and our worth within the system. Mormonism has a unique identity culture. It involves things like temple marriage and serving a mission and having a traditional family, getting your Eagle Scout, serving in high church callings, those kind of things. So what happens if someone does not fit that mold? They suffer from self-loathing and shame. They question who they are and why they are, and this is very, very damaging. The next root I want to cover is church doctrine. There's a favorite saying of mine that goes, church doctrine is a little like nailing Jell-O to a wall. It's basically impossible to define it. It is impossible. But there are fundamental doctrines and beliefs that we have within Mormonism that are widely accepted. A few of these are polygamy, eternal gender roles, the traditional family being the path to salvation, priesthood authority, prosperity gospel, and then we also have more conceptual ideas like assessing worthiness and the spirit of discernment and obedience at all times, no matter what. As problematic as some of these church doctrines are, when people start questioning them, it is impossible for them to get definitive answers. It causes them a lot of confusion and pain and even trauma. The last root I want to cover is unsustainable history. Actually, I have two more. Unsustainable history. So Mormonism is a fairly new religion. It was founded less than 200 years ago. It was part of the Reformationist revival movement of the 1800s in America. Despite how new it is, we have a rich and unique history, but it also has a lot of problems. It doesn't lack a lot of multi-perspective views, particularly those of women. And certain instances within history, certain facts are repressed and certain things have been found to be deceptive in nature in order to fit with what is a dominant narrative in our church. Things like Joseph Smith translating the Book of Mormon with a seer stone in a hat, and the Book of Abraham coming from a piece of papyri that Joseph Smith bought from someone that was later found out to be a funeral text. Other things like multiple accounts of the first vision have been problematic for members. Also, historical events like the Mountain Meadows Massacre And those things are not always told in a way that is truthful, but they're told in a way that honors and enlightens Mormonism more than is probably ethical. The last root I want to cover is discrimination. So marginalized groups exist within the church. These groups involve the LGBTQ community, persons of color, and women, among many others. So many times we see policies and the lack of diversity influencing the policies. In 2015, there was an exclusionary policy that came out, which essentially said that children of a same-sex couple could not get their saving ordinances within the church unless they disavowed their parents' marriage and actions. This was so harmful. This was traumatizing to so many. Many members questioned why on earth this would even be necessary. We also see things like historical events like the priesthood ban being lifted in 1978 so that black men could hold the priesthood. And we also see that women have really suffered overt and covert types of sexism within the church. Now, once we identify these root causes, what can we do? What does this all mean? A few things that we can do. We can start accepting and validating each other's stories. We can honor the pain. We can stop condoning spiritual abuse and unrighteous dominion. We can call it out when we see it. We can lend support and love to those who've experienced discrimination or marginalization. We can advocate for safer policies within the church and ethical behavior as an organization. And we can validate those who have felt this pain. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.